Hi everyone, welcome. We're in my wormery and I'm getting ready to feed some worms. So I just figured I'd just get the food prepped here really quick, and I got quite a bit. It's the main reason I'm actually doing it today, because I really had no more room left in the freezer to keep storing this stuff. It's going to be a pretty generous feeding today, because there is a lot of food in here, and I would like to do away with all of it. However, I'm going to keep this bag on hand just in case I'm unable to deplete the entire amount. We'll see. Hopefully we can make it all vanish. But let's see, what was down here in the beginning was a bagel. A bagel which has just been sitting around here for quite some time now, so I don't know if it's good anymore. It's a cinnamon raisin bagel, so it's a curious thing to see if the worms are going to be interested in that. I would think they would. I think they're going to like it. I got some pretty large stuff here, big chunks of celery and cabbage. And then there's all kinds of smaller shredded bits of here, like, carrot peelings from stews and some potato peelings, and I guess some stuff that looks like it might have actually been in the stew for a while. I don't know, it's hard to say. It's quite a generous amount of food, as you can see. There's even some fruit here. So in addition to that, I've also got a massive amount of coffee. I got two of these half-gallon containers. Usually I only use one. So, like I said, I got a feeling I'm going to be doing a pretty generous feeding today. So why don't we get the bins out here and get started. So now, as I've mentioned in the past, I'm kind of new to this whole bag thing. So this is one of my two Vermi bags. This one is the Vermibag Mini. And in this one I've got European night crawlers. And this is one of my two night crawler bins. I have the African night crawlers in the other one, and in the case of this one, I've been interested in just making sure that I don't end up with a lot of uncomposted stuff at the bottom of it, since it is the only flow-through container that I have in my arsenal. I usually do my composting in trays, just bus bins, but in the case of this one, since eventually the finished product is just going to be pouring out the bottom, I've been wanting to just make sure before the contents of it start to grow too deep that I regularly check in down low through the middle, just to see if it might be possible to pull out a whole bunch of uncomposted stuff that might be near the bottom, that might be in jeopardy of not getting broken down. So I've in the past I've pulled out handfuls of newspaper, crumpled up newspaper bedding type stuff that had been put down in there originally as a basis for what was added later. And I just thought that I might be able to catch another handful or two of similar stuff. I guess this is what came out here. It might be the last of it. Just some ratty old newspaper all shredded up and definitely getting there. So I guess the whole idea being that I wanted more compost going down the middle rather than a bunch of uncomposted stuff. I wanted to be able to pull out, I want to just quickly try to pull out anything like this, and just make sure it becomes the center of attention as part of the active feeding zones. Put all the foodstuffs around it so that it really is useful as a bedding rather than just stuff that's going to sit at the bottom of the material. These are only one feeding old, so they've only been here about a week or so. And if you've ever tried composting corn, then you'll know it's a slow composting item. The worms will eventually devour all of it, but you got to really be really patient and allow time for that to occur. So, all right, let's get a handful of food in here. All right, I'm going to empty one of these moldy raspberry trays. See, this stuff is nasty. Worms are going to love it, though. I guess I'll just give the raspberries or whatever these are to the night crawlers, since I've only got two to spare. I've got enough of this bagel to put a piece into each bin. So on top of all that, I'm just going to throw in some shredded carrot, maybe a piece of celery, whatever that is. Looks like a pretty decent feeding. Maybe we'll see if we can squeeze a little more in there. Okay. Give it a nice thorough coating on top of yummy food. We are going to cover it up though with all that stuff that we pushed off to the sides. But before we do, I'm going to just put a little dash of pulverized eggshell as grit into the food, as well as a bunch of used coffee grounds to cover up with. Yeah, I think that should be a good amount. It's almost like we're completely covered up already just with the coffee grounds. But we'll just take all of the stuff that's off on the sides and move it inwards. So the material is a bit dry, I must say, but not so dry that it's really throwing me into a panic. Just dry enough that I'm, willing to acknowledge it and recognize that it is that way, but not bad. As soon as you, poke down under the first inch or two, the material starts feeling pretty nice. Actually, very nice. So I'm once again going to allow the food that's been added to be the sole source of moisture that I add to this bin, if possible. In the beginning, I was adding a little bit of spray water, misting the top of the surface, trying to keep the level good. But once you get some compost down in the bottom, the level stays pretty good, just fine on its own. So put this back in its place, and we'll get the other worm bag out here. Okay, so now the other worm bag is it's really meant to be it's a bag that's supposed to be suspended inside of a tote, one of those storage totes, but I opted for not putting it into a tote, but rather placing it into a kind of dedicated wooden frame, so that it stays, suspended. And it's hard to see through this, but it is a pretty nice, fine mesh netting kind of vent. And let's see. Out comes coverings, and let's see how things look below the top of the surface. Here again, the top of the surface is pretty dry, I must say, because these bins do allow for a fair amount of airflow right through the top as well as right through the material itself. So let's just see how this African nightcrawler bin looks. The nightcrawlers are cruising around right on top, so they're not too dismayed by the dry material near the surface, luckily. Just like the European nightcrawler bin got last time, this one got a couple chunks of corn, taking on an interesting color there. And we'll see if we can identify any of the other material that was added in here as food last go around. Let's see what we find. Something a little bit larger, a chunk of something. I was able to snap it in half. It's maybe a cauliflower stem, base of a cauliflower collet, or whatever they call those things. Now we're down into the bottom of the feeding zone. Actually coming up on some worms hanging out. I just figured this might be a good opportunity, like in the other bin, just to take any sort of, squashed down bedding material like this shredded newspaper here and kind of revive it and use it as the basis for this feeding. So we'll just set it aside when we find it, and then we'll lay it down as bedding for this new feeding. And keep this stuff drenched with delicious flavors of the most newly added foods, and hopefully make it appealing to the worms to dig into it. Okay, not bad. Again, pretty dry stuff, but I'm not going to get into a tizzy about it. Just going to go with the flow here. Again, I know that I'm adding a bunch of food, all with its own moisture content. And it seemed to keep things, a little bit dry, but still healthy and comfortable for the worms, I believe. So I'm not going to break from that quite yet. I'm just going to keep going with what we've got here. And let's start adding the new food. Like we did with the other night crawlers, like the European night crawlers got, the Africans here are going to get the nice delicious raspberry treat to start with. They should really enjoy that. And like the other one got, we're going to give each one a portion of this cinnamon raisin bagel. See if they like that too. Alright, so we're going to go generous, I think. We're going to go with There's a banana peel in here, or some sort of a, something is wrapped inside that paper towel. I don't know what it is. We can throw a couple more bits of this and that on top before we cover up. Just want to make sure I save enough for the remaining 3 bins that need to be fed. So that's definitely a nice, generous portion. Just got to keep in mind that these have been here for a while and they will take some time to break down. So it's kind of commingled with the new feeding here. So let's give these guys a whole bunch of yummy coffee as well. Nice. Cool. This is like the old piece of something. Banana peel, it seems. Nice and soft, definitely breaking down. This too seems like the old piece of food that was in here. So, all right, once again, a little bit dry. I'm not going to worry about it because I know for sure that food that we just threw in there, all those banana peels, all those berries, all of those soup greens, everything as it thaws from having been frozen, it's going to kick off a whole bunch of moisture. Should make for a real nice environment for these little guys. All right, so back on we'll go the food zone marker, feeding zone marker, newspaper, and a cover up of cardboard. Looking pretty good. Let's get moving on to the next one. Okay, we're now on to the red wigglers. The red wigglers, I have 3 trays similar to this of red wigglers. And of the 3, this one is the most aged of the 3. The newest one I have is only about 6 weeks old, but this one's been around for more than 2 months now. And these bins are probably going to be a little different. You know, like when we look at the Nightcrawler bins that we just looked at, they're in fabric bags, so they're definitely getting a lot more air. So they're going to tend to run a little bit more dry. And I did start each of those containers with a fairly small number of worms, and they were baby worms when they started too. So taking that into account, that the bin started with a small population of tiny infant worms, and still might not have even gone through a cycle of breeding yet. That you know, those populations will start to grow nicely in time, but they are still fledgling populations. So it's going to be a while before we see my Nightcrawler populations get like my red wiggler populations. My red wiggler populations, though, as you're about to see, are always quite dense populations in my bins. I always start bins with large numbers of worms, and the worms are always quite happy. So, you know, we're going to definitely see a bunch of worms hanging out down here in the feeding zone. And the food that we're seeing was added a week ago. See, I guess a piece of cabbage. Just make a little bit more space in here. This is a piece of cauliflower. This might be more cabbage. So there are some leftovers from the last feeding, but there's obviously also other things that they found a lot more appealing that they've already put more focus into eating, like this cantaloupe rind. Kind of makes sense that they would go for the sweeter, more sugary foods first, and then start, you know, falling back on the vegetables after eating all the fruits first. So just gonna make some room in here so we can add in a new batch of food. We'll allow all these large chunks of the existing food that were already in here when we started to remain on center stage. Let that be the focal point of their feeding to finish what they got a week ago, and then we'll just add in alongside that a nice generous helping. Yeah. All right. So no more berries. The berries were for the night crawlers. So these big pieces of lettuce are going to be the main event for these guys. A whole bunch more of the same. All kinds of delicious soup greens. Potato peels. Some of this stuff looks like it's already been in the soup. Some of it might have been fished out after it was cooking for a while. Some of it might have been peeled while it was still fresh and raw. So all kinds of delicious stuff in here for the worms. And we're going to stick to what we've been doing so far on each of these bins, is we're going to provide a little bit of grit in each case, because I think last time we didn't even add any. And we're going to sprinkle in a nice portion of coffee grinds for them. Coffee grounds? Ooh, it's a nice portion. So I'm going to start pushing this material in towards the center, and we'll try to level off as we go. Get this food down low. Alright, so things look pretty decent in here. Now with these bins, we had talked about maybe trying to agitate some of this drier stuff from the outer edges and move it in towards closer to the feeding zone where most of the moisture is going to be emanating from all the food items. But not this go around. I just figured I was going to stick to the way stuff is laid out now and let it continue as is to see how they progress over time. I still think everything's in pretty good shape over here. A little bit drier on out in the further edges away from the feeding zone, but still not terrible. So I'm going to stick to what we got right now and move ahead. All right, what do we have left? Got those two on the bottom shelf. Let's go grab them. All right, so this has been number 2 of 3. The third one is the last one we're going to feed. And we are working our way to the newer bins. So we're going from the oldest to the newest, as we've been doing for the past few weeks. So as we progress, we should start to see some. This is really nice. As soon as you peel back these little very thin layer of dry leaves on the very tippy top, just tons of really beautiful castings in here. You see a little leaf sticking out here too. That must be part of the previous feeding. So let's move these dry leaves on the very, very thin surface to the side. And we'll get to check out some of this beautiful casting material. Nice and level and dark, moist. I'd almost say this is better than the first bin. I would definitely have to say this is better than the first bin. Much more attractive castings. Seems like a little bit more moisture right on the surface as soon as you get down below the thin layer of leaves on top. And wow, I guess that thin layer of casting material right on the top is also kind of a clue that the whole surface right beneath the tippy top layer is just teeming with worms all the way through. So I'm just peeling them back, peeling the castings back gently so we can get a sense of all the worms in this bin. See if we can get a good look at the type of food they were working on for the past week. Sometimes I see stuff that I fed in the previous feeding and I remember what I was doing, but usually it helps to revisit stuff to refresh my memory. This little plum looks pretty interesting with all that mold inside of it. I would think that the worms are going to love that. As you peel into this section though, it's amazing. It's almost like pure worms. It's so crazy when you poke your fingers through. There's all kinds of little food bits in it, but almost all worms. Let's see if I could just gather up the large chunks of food that I see as I work my way through. Maybe not all of it. As long as I can clear the middle section where I'd like to place the new food. Or would it be better to move the old food down into the middle? It's kind of what we did on the last one. We kept all the old food in the middle. Maybe on this one we'll put the new food in the middle. We'll move some of this old food out to the edge. Let's do that. Very nice. Gotta love a densely populated worm bin. Not sure what that is. Peach. I remember we added peaches last week, so that's what that has to be. See why that would be a popular item. Here too, just gobs and gobs of worms. Very cool. Here too, some slimy remainder of their food. Alright, let's throw some fresh food in here and move on. I've got 2 bins that I need to feed with the remainder of the food, so I'm just going to go with half of what I see remaining in the tray there. But maybe this time we'll start with the coffee to lay that down as a little bit of a protective layer so this frozen food that follows doesn't throw these poor little guys into shock. So we'll just use that as a little insulating layer. Or maybe reverse everything. We'll just throw this in on top of there. A little bit of grit. And then onward with the feeding. Keep dropping pieces here. Let's not forget the bagel. Okay. It's not such a huge feeding, I must say. I wonder if I'm doing things a little bit backwards, like the bin that appears to have the most worms gets the least amount of food. Huh. We'll see how it goes. We'll keep an eye on it. So here again, I'm just, using this as an opportunity to sort of inspect the material off on the outer edges too. And things look pretty good in here as well. The worms are enjoying that section as well. There's dryness over there, but there's also nice patches of comfortable, moist stuff that they can hang out in, so I'm not worried. Maybe one of these days the bins will get sort of a turning around, or try to bring the moist stuff out to the edges where the dry stuff was, and vice versa. All right. One last bin. Okay, now this bin here, very similar setups. If I'm not mistaken, this bin was also launched with a fairly large number of worms. So I think we're going to see a very similar setup in here. Right beneath the top layer of leaves, maybe not quite as damp and covered in castings. So maybe not quite as many worms right beneath the tippy top surface. But I suspect we got a good number regardless. What have we here? Oh, this was a carrot. Interestingly shaped carrot. Which hasn't really made much progress, but I would think, a week is not quite enough for it to start really breaking down a lot. So definitely have to give it some more time. Let's see if we can pile up their old foods. And we'll do what we did in the last bin. We'll, what do we do? Push them either to the middle or to the side, and then add the new food afterwards. What's this? Might have been part of a peach. I think this one got a peach too. There's some large chunks, cauliflower, maybe another piece of peach. There's some sort of big chunky fruit or vegetable. Here's another carrot. I feel that one was pretty rotted. Some of these carrots were really nasty when they went in here. All right. If it feels like it's mostly castings, if there's little bits of food in there, I'm not going to sweat it. I'm just going to try to move the larger chunks aside. It's another plum. The middle of it is also very moldy, like we saw in the other bin. Same thing here. Still don't smell that kind of stinky fermentation smell like if it was turning to alcohol. Hopefully it'll be consumed before that could occur. Alright, got a few more large chunks that I'm just trying to move out of the middle. Make some room for the fresh new food. Some more bedding stuff, I think. Maybe not food anymore. Don't want to pull too much of the bedding out of here, I don't think. It seems to be situated pretty nicely, and the worms seem pretty content, so I'm not going to disturb it too much more. Alright, so let's grab all these partially eaten food items. Get them all back down low. Yummy. Okay, we've left ourselves a nice little hole here on the bottom. And all we're going to do, I think, at this point is pour in the remainder of the food. Because the rest is all for this bin at this point. Alright. But once again, since it is frozen food, and since we have coffee here, that's intended for them as well, we'll use this as sort of a buffer zone so they don't get a bunch of frozen stuff poured on top of them. Hardly any left. But I've got a whole other container of it, so I'm good. Alright, what do we end up with here? Mostly a lot of real fine, small particles. Throw some on top of the new feeding. Let's put this over here. Oh yeah, here's a piece of bagel. Alright. This is a nice generous feeding too. There always does seem to be some leftovers remaining in the bin when I come back to visit the next time, so I don't know if it makes that big of a difference if the neighboring bin got a little bit more. Nothing seems to come to the point where we've got starving worms, that's for sure. Yeah, you can see on this one a lot more leaves on the top surface. Although, you know, sometimes I kind of get a little overzealous and I get into, like, you know, turning things around, turning things inside out and upside down and everything. So there may have been times when I've, you know, already turned a bunch of the leaves that should be on the top surface down into the material. I'm sure the worms like that. That's probably most closely related to the type of food that, you know, millions of generations of these critters have grown up on. So I think leaves are good. Leaves are good for the bin, that's for sure. Makes the worms feel at home. All right. Well, that was it for today. Not a lot more to show here other than, you know, maybe make a video about me cleaning up. No, I don't think so. That wouldn't be very interesting. I'll tend to the put away and the cleanup around here of everything. So I'll just finish with that, and just want to say thank you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, definitely remember to give me a thumbs up. I always really appreciate that. And also consider becoming a subscriber to the channel. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.